Hi everyone, this is Dr. Heather Austin Robillard, and this lecture video is going to discuss interpreting scores from assessments and screeners, including the assumptions, norms, and kind of a crash course on some statistics. In the previous lecture video, we talked about the different levels of a measurement, and so now we need to kind of know what to do with the different data that we're given. We need to know what the numbers actually represent in our tools and assessments, and how do we score and interpret these tools. To completely score and interpret tests, we need a little bit of knowledge about statistics. So don't get frightened, we're just going to go over a brief crash course of statistics today. You may get a little scared looking at a graph like this, but in statistics, this is what we typically are going to see. You're going to be presented with a lot of different numbers or scores. And this can be for a specific construct. Let's say we're studying addiction, or we're looking at craving or motivation. You can make it easier to digest by summarizing this information. For example, this is a frequency distribution. Basically, it's a tally of all the individuals who scored within a certain range. Which scores have the most people, which scores are most likely or least likely to occur. It is easier to get an idea of the characteristic of this group of people. You can make it even easier by using something like a histogram. These show us again what scores most people landed in, which most people are least likely to occur in, and again gives us a little bit more of an information about this group of individuals. Here is a copy of distributions of various psych constructs like conscientious, emotional stability, creativity, and value. Again, as you can see, the graph kind of shows us how everybody scores within. Here's another example of the average IQ score, which the score of 100 is average. Is this giving you an idea of where we are headed and how distributions can be used to score and interpret information? What we typically want is what we call a normal curve, where most of the people are in the middle, and then there's a few people over to one side and a few people over to the other side. Almost any variable that we think of, this is kind of what we're going to find. However, a normal distribution or a normal curve is not the only distribution. You can have a bimodal where there's kind of like two groups of the majority of the people. It could be kind of rectangular or even. It could be positively skewed, where most people kind of land in this lower portion, and then there's a few people scoring higher. Or it can be negatively skewed, where most people land higher on the score and less people land lower. In addiction, we also deal with a non-normal distribution. What this means is that most people are actually not going to be at a high risk of their alcohol and drug use. That's why it's going to be a positively skewed distribution. Another way to get more information about the distribution of the individuals is to look at measures of central tendency. And if you may remember from high school, these include mode, median, and mean. Central tendency is the statistical measure to determine a single score and that defines the center of a distribution. The goal is to find the single score or number that would be best representative of the group. So a mean, median, and mode. With mode, you are looking for the score that occurs the most often or most frequent score. So if you look at this distribution, we have 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5. So what is the mode of this distribution? It would be 3. Mode in continuous data, if we have a perfect distribution or normal curve, is going to also be likely in the middle. Another central tendency measurement is median. This is the score in the middle of the distribution when all the scores are arranged in order from lowest to highest. It's also what we would call the 50th percentile. The position of the median is the number of scores plus 1 divided by 2. The median in this distribution is also 3. Again, in a perfect normal distribution, the median and mode would be in the same area. Then there is a mean in the sample, which is basically the average. So you take all of the scores for these individuals, add them all up, and then divide them by the number. So in this example, we have 7 participants. So we would add up the sum of all of their scores and then divide it by 7, which would be 64.57 inches. And again, in a normal distribution, the mean, median, and mode would all be in the center of the curve. This is where most people would be. However, not all distributions are normal. So this is how the mean, median, and mode would occur in different distributions. In a negatively skewed distribution, the mode would likely become in the middle of the highest point, then would be the median, but the mean would be pulled over to the side. And the opposite effect for the positively skewed. Here's the summary of the central tendency measurements. They are to determine a single score that defines the center of the distribution. The goal is to find a score or number that would be best representative of that group. It's also important to understand the variability of the measures. The variability measures how spread out or bunched together the scores are in a distribution. This includes variability, dispersion, spread, and width. And the types of variability you would use would be range, interquartile range, mean deviation, variance, and standard deviation. These are ways of splitting the normal curve just to make it easy to interpret and remember scores. So we can do this by percentages or percentiles. The z-scores, t-scores, standard deviation, these would be where everybody would be at on the curve. So example, in a normal curve, the mean, median, mode is 0. And then if anybody was in between the 0 and 13.59%, they would be 1 standard deviation away. So 1 standard deviation away from the mean. Percentile is also a special case. So for example, there would be the 100th percentile all the way to the 1st percentile. Let's say Bob's score is 477. If Bob's score is in the 99th percentile, this means that he is higher than 99% of those that took the same test, the norm of the group. So only 1% of that group scored higher than him. So you may be asking yourself, do I really need to know all of this to become a licensed chemical dependency counselor? And the answer is yes. You could be using this information in different assessments. For example, the SASI, or the Substance Abuse Subtle Screening Inventory, specifically uses statistics to show developers, to show the cutoffs and how they range within distribution, as you can see from this graph. So in summary, there are different distributions, different measurements of central tendency, as well as the measures of variability in a group of scores, and how we can use these to interpret scores of the assessments that we're using. Please make sure you're reading through all your readings to get more information, and then we will have another module giving more detail about statistical information for interpreting scores.